guys, welcome back to The Only Broken Body. This should be the last night of our expose on Mormonism, the way I kind of mapped it up. I'm not going to keep going through the Seer Stone and stuff. I was going to, I'm not going to. You guys can Google that. I gave you guys the books. You can look into the Illuminati. You can look at all the different stuff. It's crazy and it's out there for you, but I just don't want to spend our time with it. I really wanted this series to be focused in discipleship. So what I'm doing is kind of writing it right back over. I did get through the temple. That's what I wanted. I wanted to get through the temple because the temple is an exact replica of not only the Masons, but the Luciferian church, which ironically is the same as the Masonic church. And that's what I wanted, guys. So this is going to be kind of the recap, the bring it together, the close it all up type of thing. And I just wanted to have that. Now, before we get started, guys, I got to tell you, when you go through this part of it, this type of the doctrinal expose, where it comes to discipleship, asking questions, bridging the gap, trying to share the gospel, these types of things, you got to prepare for a couple things. And one of them I call the element of God. Okay, what the element of God is when they can't answer a question, they're going to say, well, that's because God does it. So, for example, I'm going to ask you later to ask them a question. How could these plates be so huge, and yet they were lifted by these men? These men carried these things. And they're going to say, well, because of God. And what I mean by the God element is the same thing that you and I would say when it says in Exodus that Moses and them walked 40 years in the wilderness and their shoes didn't tear or anything. You and I would say, well, how is that possible? Well, that's the element of God. How did Moses do the miracles in Egypt? Because of God. Now, this is the key, guys, to using the element of God. Okay? The element of God has not ever contradicted the logic of God. Okay? God has never had someone do something they couldn't do for no reason. There was always a message. There was always a purpose. There was always a reason. He wasn't just bored one day and was like, hey, I'm going to make the sun stand still right here in the sky. And then the Israelites were like, oh, hey, that worked out to our advantage. No, they answered a prayer. The fleece wasn't outside, and then God was like, I'm going to make it rain one day, I'm going to make it dry the next day. No, it's answering a prayer. Okay, it's a Gideon's prayer. Does anybody remember those examples? That's what I mean by the element of God. So the element of God, He can do a lot of things, guys. When I say a lot of things, I'm not saying I limit Him. There's things He doesn't do that He could do. Okay? But some of the things that they have are so unbelievable and impossible in the realm of the logic of God that it begs the question. And I'm going to give you a couple of those, especially with the Hill of Korah. I also apologize, guys. I'm one of the people that's getting over everything that's going around, but I'm doing a lot better than some of the other people. But if I get sneezing or anything, I do apologize. But we're going to look at the logic of God, and the logic of God comes from Scripture. Guys, when you have the Book of Mormon, and you have the Bible, let me get a hold one. That one almost went out the window. And you have the Bible, and they're part 1 and 2. There should be some type of continuity. There should be some type of unity in the overall purpose of God. Okay? If it was a book of stories, and there's not an overall purpose of God, then it is irrelevant to us. These stories and these accounts, history or otherwise, whether they be myth, whether they be fable, whatever it is, even if they're teaching morality, they would be irrelevant. The whole purpose of God in the Bible is what draws everything in it together. Everything in it together. The prophets, the priesthood, the law, the commandments, the good, the bad, the sin, the redemption, the Savior. Is everybody, the lost, the saved, Satan, everything is brought together and weaved together in the narrative, or the meta-narratives as I've taught you guys, which means the story behind the story where something's aware of itself. When you're reading the Bible, it seems like the person behind the book is aware of where it's going. Okay, the best example I can give you guys is a huge Lord of the Rings fan. From start to finish, the story builds in such a way because the author knows where he's going. He knows where he wants to get to, and you're on the journey of how he got there. Okay, he's not caught off guard like you are. Okay, when Gandalf gets taken down the Balrog, J.R.R. Tolkien did not lose sleep wondering what's going to happen. He knew, because it already existed in his mind. He knew Gandalf the Grey is going to become Gandalf the White, and he's going to be there for the battle of the 5 armies, and he's going to show up right at the last minute when it looks like we're losing, and he says, look to the east, and then look to the east. I'm ruining it for you guys, but you had time to see it. And we get there and we see it. He knew Frodo wasn't going to throw the ring in the fire. He knew Gollum was going to have to jump on him and fall in the fire, and Gollum was going to die, showing the arrogance and greed of man. The person behind the book, God, had a meta-narrative. He said, I, God, created you people to love and obey and worship me. I gave you free will, which means you also have the capacity to not obey me, not love me, and not worship me. And he wrote a book talking about the consequences of when you do that. What does it look like when you obey God? What does it look like when you disobey God? Okay? And then he said, because of what you have done and chosen to do with the free will that I gave you, as a sovereign, loving God, a creator God, now I also have to redeem you. You can't be in my presence anymore because you chose to be without me, and now I have to redeem you. Enter Jesus Christ. Enter the Savior. God says, well, it's only one person that can die for all of mankind. They have to be eternal. They have to be able to go back and forth all the way through and cover everybody. They have to live on human terms because they have to prove that they can love and worship and obey me and stay sinless and then die for all the sinful people. That's what we call atonement. And the third thing is he has to be God because he has to be able to conquer the power of not only death, but sin and hell. That is the whole meta-narrative of the book of the Bible, of the Old and New Testament, broken up into covenants, broken up into eras, broken up into dynasties, broken up into kingdoms, broken up into priesthoods and things that were broken and corrupt, just as man is. Enter the Book of Mormon, or the Quran, or any other book that claims to be another testament, or a third part. This book does not weave together that meta-narrative. This book actually weaves together its own meta-narrative. And that God is not the only God. And that there are many gods. And that Jesus is Satan's brother. And that he didn't really die for everybody. Only a little bit for Adam. And then all of this nonsense about planets. Can somebody who's got their phone Google the Bible verse where God says, who is there that I should pay? There's no other God behind me. I meant to get that one before I started. Okay? You do not see the same... I want the... God says is that there's no other God. Or who's the God behind me that I should pay? It might be Job, it might not. Job's sticking in my head for a minute, but I'm also working on Job, so I want to have that. We can drop it in the group chat. But we got to remember that. What was God trying to accomplish? The redemption of mankind. He's not trying to make you God. He's trying not to bring you up to the elevation of Jesus' status in heaven. He's trying to redeem you from your created position. He doesn't have to exalt you to be an angel. He doesn't have to exalt you to be a God. He made you the way He wanted to make you in the relationship era that He wanted. He just has to redeem that. You guys realize that, right? We don't have to become something we're not. These books claim that for themselves. You have it?
I think so. I don't know if
okay, sorry for the unprofessionalism. I just want to make sure we have this. See if this is it. No. No, that's not the one. I'll get it before we get done. Guys, there's a Bible verse, especially you guys online that are watching, where God mentions, is there a God behind me? Is there someone that I should pay? Is there a God that I owe? In our book, God thinks He's the only God. You guys realize that, right? He thinks He's the only God. Which means if later this God, who's telling me and you He's the only God, later tells us, well, there's actually many gods and I'm one of them and we all have planets and there's infinite worlds, that means He's a what?
Liar.
He's a liar. Is that a good God? Is that someone who's pure, someone holy, somebody you want to follow, somebody you want to love? He's going to get mad at you and put me on the third planet? Or dare I say, put me into hell and tell me that I can't do the things that I want to do when He's a liar? Does He have sex? Yeah, He does. Why do I get in trouble the way I use my sex? Is everybody seeing it, guys? Once they bring God down to the human level, that's when we should crucify Him because He's the same as me and you and we deserve to be crucified. But when God is exalted the way He's supposed to be, in the status that He lives in and exists in the realm that He's in, you would never put Him on the cross because He would never deserve it. Is everybody following that? I know I'm a little worked up here, guys, because I've been talking to a couple people that are dealing with this, and some of the questions popped up. And I know they should be watching, if not live, but later on, and they're going to know, and they're going to say, I knew he was going to be worked up. I do get worked up about this stuff, guys, because they're lying to you about Jesus, they're lying to you about the real God, they're lying to you about salvation, and you're going to find hell a lot worse than the third planet that Joseph Smith tells you you're going to land on. I can tell you that. So guys, if you're blinded or indoctrinated by this church, look into these questions. The Bill Schneeblen is the one, before he left the Mormon church, he had a list of questions. And he said, if you can answer these questions, if you can answer even a few of these questions, I won't leave the church. And they couldn't answer a single one. And some of those questions are going to be on my list tonight. I didn't just copy and paste his, but I encourage you to look at his questions. The Mormon church cannot answer them. You got living prophets that talk directly to God, and they can't answer these questions. They don't know history. They don't know science. They don't know the Bible. And they cannot put together the Book of Covenants with the Book of Mormon. So it says, well, are they really gods? Are they really prophets? Do they really know? Are they really enlightened? And the answer is astounding. No, they're not. And they meet none of the requirements of prophets. They cannot do miracles. Okay, their messages don't come true. The Bible tells us if their message doesn't come true, what are you and I supposed to do? Old Testament, mind you. What do you do with prophets' messages that don't come true? What do you do with the prophet?
Kill him?
You kill them because they're not God's prophets. You know how many people would have thought twice about lying about their prophecies, knowing that was coming? Joseph Smith makes 60. He gets 59 and a half of them wrong, and they're like, hey, he's God. Come on, man, guys, we got to be smarter than this. We got to hold ourselves as humanity accountable for evidence and information. Remember, even God did not leave you without reason. Even God did not leave you without logic. Job says only God could walk across water. Who did we see do that?
Peter.
We saw Peter do it because of who?
God.
Who walked across water?
Yeah,
I'm looking for his name, looking for Jesus. Jesus walked across water. If only God can walk across water and Jesus walked across water, then Jesus has to be who?
God.
He's got to be God. There's no way around the evidence that God gave. God always gave them evidence. Even, I told you guys, read the book of Mark. After Jesus feeds the 5,000, the bread and fish, he gets on the boat with the disciples, they realize they forgot the stuff. It's probably Brian supposed to be grabbing the bag and he didn't. And they're like, now we're going to starve. And Jesus says, do you not believe yet? Have you not seen? Are you not persuaded? And then later, Jesus, shortly after that, heals a blind man. And Peter gets it. And he answers the question, who do you say I am? We have to do the same, guys. With any modern-day prophet, anybody that claims any type of esoteric knowledge. As we're finishing, guys, I did want to answer one of the questions. I have one more, guys. The question with, how would they know? Moses, when he was told to go to Egypt, he said, God, how are they going to know? And God said, pick up your staff you hold in your hand. He gave him a way to prove what he was. When Jesus came, he did miracles. Now he told him, the only sign you're going to be given is the Jonah. And 3 days in the heart of the whale, and 3 days in the heart of the earth. But he did miracles to prove his message, to prove his character, to prove who he was. Where's Joseph Smith's miracle? Where's Muhammad's dated miracle? Where's his miracle that we can see? He's like, oh, I jumped over the moon and nobody saw it. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to believe that one, okay? I'm going to hold off for the rest of them. I had a question about the harem of Christ. The harem of Christ comes from the verse Mark 15:41, where it mentions that Jesus had female followers and that they would keep him up with their substance. They say that that means they had sex with Jesus and that he bore them children. And that's where a lot of these people get this idea of a lineage of Christ. And you'll see it later in these nonsensical people that never read a history book or know anything about history. Priory of Zion and all this stuff. Dan Brown and his Da Vinci Code. Again, guys, they never read a history book. They only read what the religious people want to tell them is true history. And it doesn't make sense with what we can know and what we can prove. So that was the harem of Christ. The last one, guys, in the Greek, I mentioned the demon Mormo. In the Greek, he's a god, and he's a child eater. He eats children. In the Magus, which is what the occult uses, he's a lustful demon. Now, this is not just for sex. Okay, so I mentioned that he was all for sex. He's actually for greed and everything else, which is just lust. He lusts for everything. Sex, blood, and power are the three things he's known for. Again, put that correlation. Mormo is where Joseph Smith gets the name Mormon. So when they call themselves Mormons, the Mormon Church, are they naming themselves after Christ?
No.
Are they even naming themselves after Joseph Smith?
No.
You man, I mean, guys, you want to talk about, remember, they're a bunch of racists, so you want to talk about a white cult? Name us the Joseph Smiths. You know, we make the joke all the time. Does anybody know one of like the famous names they gave at Ellis Island? I guess I'm looking for you maybe on this one a little bit older. Ellis Island, when they didn't have, they were hard to assign these immigrants names, so they would say, okay, you're John Smith. You're Adam Smith now. You know, they would give them these blanket names. Guys, that's where I was like, oh, John Smith, John, these would be great names. So we call ourselves John Smiths of the Latter-day Saints. He didn't even name the church after him. He puts it under Mormon, under Mormo. So are they even under Joseph Smith, or are they under a demon?
A demon.
They're under a demon. Okay, we got to remember that, guys. When we come into discipleship, you are not, guys, look at me. Everybody look at me. You are not, everybody up there, merely presenting information, facts, and truth. You're battling a demonic stronghold over the mind, over the heart, over the spirit, over the body. You want to talk about setting the captives free? If you go and you don't saturate yourself in prayer, you're going to be running with your tail between your legs because you're not just battling people. You're not just battling Joseph Smith. So I wanted you guys to look that up. Okay? The last one, we're going to do the Hill of Quorum here in just a second. I'm going to get to that. But I wanted to get a little bit of a rundown before back here on the board. Does anybody remember, here's the gold star, which they knew it was coming, so it's not really fair. You didn't have time to prepare. Does anybody remember the 5 unforgivable sins of Mormonism? The 5 things you can't do. Go ahead.
Marry a black person.
Can't marry a black person.
Can't leave the church.
Can't leave the church.
Murder, adultery.
Can't commit a murder. Can't commit adultery.
And we're not fighting for this.
You both got 2. It's the tiebreaker. Winner takes it here.
Oh, I remember.
I'm going to help you guys for the sake of time. Homosexuality. Oh. Okay, cannot be a homosexual. Okay, those are the 5 no's of Mormonism. Now remember, black people can join the Mormon church, and now they can even be priests to a lower level. They can never reach the exaltation. But their family and their wives, they can never be sealed for time and all eternity, which is what it's called in the temple, because they're black. Which means a white person marries a black woman, nope. White person marries a black man, nope. Doesn't matter any type of interrace, and if you're both black, woman and a man, it's just a double negative. Neither of them are going. Okay? Now, I talked about the 4 conundrums of Joseph Smith. He said no one's ever going to leave him like they did Jesus, like they did Moses. And yet he started what's called the Nauvoo Legion, or the Danites, to stop dissenters from leaving the Mormon church. And even off camera, we mentioned the study in Scarlet, where Arthur Conan Doyle, the writer of Sherlock Holmes, wrote a whole story showing that the Mormons were out killing people. Then you have the fact he was told that none of them were true and not to join a single one of them. And even after that revelation, he joins the Methodist Church, the Episcopal Methodist Church, who later kicks him out for being an occultist. He said that the covenant of polygamy would be everlasting and it's necessary in order for exaltation. To go to heaven, you have to practice polygamy. And later the church changed it, which means it's not an everlasting covenant. So it's like, well, if I died outside of the everlasting covenant when it was still a command, do I get to go back and let back into heaven now? And they're like, we have to baptize you for the dead. And the last one, guys, the baptism authority. Does anybody remember the baptism authority argument? This is one of the biggest ones I hit them with, the baptism conundrum. Go ahead.
I don't know if I'm thinking of the right one, but wasn't it when someone baptized someone and they got baptized by the person they baptized?
Yeah, you got it. You're missing the stuff that I needed, but you got the rest of it. Somebody was baptized by somebody, and then that person baptized that guy. The Mormon church is all about the authority of baptism. Okay? Who gives you the authority to baptize? Who gave you the authority to baptize? This ordinance of baptism. But Joseph Smith was baptized by Oliver Cowdery. Oliver Cowdery is the one that baptized Joseph Smith. Neither of them were baptized by someone who already had the authority. And who was with us? Anybody remember who was there watching the baptism? Peter, James, Jesus, and John the Baptist. They're watching this baptism take place on the Susquehanna River, and yet Joseph Smith has to be baptized, and then later has to baptize. Okay? It's circular reasoning. It doesn't make sense. I'm not going to do the pillars again, guys, and again, the weapons of discipleship are up here a little faded. We're going to hit the similarities between Mormonism and Islam, because these are very important as part of discipleship, inside of the mindset that this is a cult. The pagan gods of old, they never went anywhere. They changed masks and names, but they never went anywhere. Which is why these accounts are always so similar. The same demons, the same gods, and remember that term, are still rebelling against God to this day. So they both believe in child marriage. They will marry children. They will have sex with children. Okay? Mormons nowadays, maybe not as much as far as the pure one, but you got their president in jail for child molestation and sex exploitation and all kinds of bad stuff. So it's definitely there. It's mentioned that Brigham Young, when he was fat and old and dying, and they had to sit him up in bed so he could be married, and some of them would have sex to consummate the marriage, and these were 12, 14, 16, 17, 18. Again, we get higher, like, oh, it's not so bad. But they went lower. What it is for Mormons and what it was for Mormons and is for Islam, after the woman has the period, the girl, whether that be 9, 10, 11, or 12, she's able for marriage and she's ready for sex. And they give them out to 40, 50-year-old people. And people are like, oh, the worldwide sex ring, it's so crazy, and no one will... Guys, it's been in the religious world. We got jokes about lustful Catholic priests. People that say, hey, don't sit on your archbishop's lap at church. Why is that a stereotype? Because it's true. Even Catholicism is a sex cult. but they already got their expose. They both believe in clitorectomies. What that means is they remove the clitoris so that sex is not pleasurable for the woman. It's a painful procedure, and they do that because they believe that by removing pleasure of sex for the woman will not be tempted in lust. Coming from the man that gets to have sex with as many women and wives as he wants, as long as he's married, he doesn't commit adultery with them. Islam, they can rape, murder, marry, whatever they want to do. But the women are the ones that are going to go to hell for sexual promiscuity and lust. Again, guys, it's projection. The men are like, we cannot contain ourselves, so we will blame and stone the woman. We'll cover the woman. Guys, you know how much better Islam would be if all the men were just issued chastity belts? And then they have to unlock them for marriage and sex, and then they lock them back up. They're like, no, how would we rape the children if we had chastity belts? They both have a 9/11 specific date massacre because of their prophet. Brigham Young, Mountain Meadows Massacre, where the Baker Fancher Rancher Party was massacred by them, and the children were adopted into Mormon families, and then most of us were alive. Are you guys alive for 9/11? Actually, I take that back, because you guys are way younger, so this is me and you, brother. The rest of us were alive to see what Islam's willing to do. And has it changed that much, guys? Look at the world around us. Look at what's happening in Bonnie. Look what's happening in these other areas. Has that much changed? Or are they still killing people? Is there still terrorism? You coming up for me? Okay. They both teach and believe in a sexual heaven.
I Googled the verse, but it's found one from Job 41.
Yeah, this is the one I wanted. Okay, I knew it was in Job. Look at, I know my Bible a little bit. Here we go, guys. They both believe in a sexual heaven. Mormons believe you're going to get a planet where you're going to have sex with Heavenly Mother or Heavenly all these mothers and your wives, and women are going to be eternally pregnant and having babies, and then men are going to be having sex forever just like God, and God has His sex. But then the Mohammedans, Islam, they believe they're going to get 40 virgins and have sex with them forever, and it's a place of pleasure. Again, it's all about sex. Why wouldn't a sex cult have a sex heaven? It makes sense. I skipped polygamy there. Polygamy, they both believe in polygamy. They both believe in multiple people, partners, marriage. The one with Mormonism, again, though, they believe you have to be married, so they won't have sex with people that weren't their wife. Joseph Smith did, but the Mormons won't. But we'll get into that when you start to meet Mormons and talk to them. You'll see which one you're dealing with. Forced acceptance. Islam will kill you if you leave. That's really what jihad is mainly for. Jihad is mainly against people that have left Islam. But there is enough jihad left for the rest of us that refuse to submit. They usually go 3 ways, guys. Say, hey, you willing to accept it? We say no. And they say, okay, you got to pay the tax. And we say no, and they say, okay, now we got to behead you. If you pay the tax as a Muslim, you can live in Muslim countries. But if you refuse to pay the tax and to become a Muslim, then they cut your head off. Mormonism had, again, the Nauvoo Legion, the Danites, and even still, they try to force people through corruption, through their job, through the way they entangle their money together. And you can Google all that yourself or watch the documentaries that Brian's doing, and you will see how they force acceptance or what they do to people that try to leave. One documentary in particular, when a father was leaving to keep his daughters from being raped by the president who's currently in prison, and the brothers try to go after him. The brothers are so brainwashed, they would go after the dad. Both Joseph Smith and Muhammad prayed for the truth. You go. I'm going to be there for a minute. Prayed for the true doctrine. They say, hey, which church should I join? And Jesus or an angel or God, whoever it is, depending on your account, came to them and said, none of them are true, and I'm going to make you the final prophet, and you're going to be the truth. You're going to be the final one. Both were visited by an angel, Muhammad by Gabriel, and Moroni to Joseph Smith. Both had visions. Okay, both were familiar and associated with the occult. They didn't just know about it. They weren't like, yeah, there's an occult bookstore down the road. They had the books. They were practiced in it. Muhammad's family was practicing the pagan occult. Again, these aren't like conspiracy theories where you go, like, oh, well, how do you know that? Just Google it. Just look it up. Just go to a library, I might add. And we get all of Joseph Smith. Islam's going to get theirs here soon. They both said they were given a plan to restore the truth. They both wrote a third testament. Muhammad tells you in the Quran that you need to look at the book of the Jews and the book of the Christians. That's Old and New Testament. And Joseph Smith says that they give a lot of call-outs to our book, to our Bible. So it says a third testament, another testament of Jesus Christ. That's what it says on your Book of Mormon. Another testament of Jesus Christ. If this is another, that means he has a formal one. And then they both say, where's that? Up here it is. And they both say that this one has been corrupted. But we're going to get there in a minute. They both claim to be the final prophet, which is ironic because the Mormon Church believes in living prophets. They say a living prophet is better than a dead prophet. So a living prophet can change what a dead prophet said. A living prophet can contradict what a dead prophet said. But Joseph Smith said, I'm going to be the final prophet. And the rest of the Mormon Church was like, no, we got more. They both claim their records are stored in heaven. There is no account of the Quran that you can read and see except what Muhammad wrote. There is no Book of Mormon that you could read other than what Joseph Smith said he had been written down. But they say now, where are the plates, Joseph Smith? Where is the writing of the translation, Muhammad? And both the Quran say, and the Joseph Smith writings, all three of them say they were taken up into heaven. Both are polytheistic, which means they believe in more than one God. Allah for Muslims or the Islamic tribes was one God of the 350 pantheons of the Arabian pagan system. And Joseph Smith believes that there's more than one God even still. And again, he believes that you and I are going to become those gods. Neither lived the doctrine that they preached. Neither did. Muhammad didn't live up to his own words. He was like, I'm going to mess up, I'm a man. Joseph Smith's like, yeah, polygamy, no, polygamy, yes, polygamy, no, polygamy, yes, sex, yes, witchcraft, no. I'm guaranteeing this guy had a cup of coffee, he probably had a beer, and I guarantee he smoked a cigarette one time too, and he probably had chocolate. I'm sure he probably had a black woman on the side he didn't mention about. It's everybody else they wanted to live these lifestyles. They both believed in progressive revelations. Joseph Smith believes everything he taught was more progressive. It was building on what was already taught when it actually contradicted, and so did Muhammad. He believed he was being given more progression on what was already revealed, which means he's building on the foundation. But as I said, with Mormonism, they contradict, they do not progress. Both are promised the earth and heaven to their followers. Islam says we're going to get the whole world, everybody's going to be under Sharia law, they're trying to do it now in America, you're going to do it and you're going to like it, don't be an Islamophobe. And they say everybody's going to get it, and then heaven to everybody in Islam if God decides to. Most women in Islam go to hell, sorry about your bad. And then again, Mormons, they get to be pregnant. And then incest. Incest is superiority. Muhammad is big, and the Islamic people are big on incest because they want to keep their pure prophetic, religious bloodline, all this nonsense, within the family rather than distorting it with these other bloodlines. And Mormonism is the same way. And again, watch the documentaries and look how many people are handed to their second cousin or their third 50-year-old rapist uncle. They wouldn't even be allowed at the cookout for most of us at ours. I want to make sure I got all my stuff. So everybody's seeing all these different things. Is it coming together a little bit for everybody? I'm not going to go into the seer stone as far as paganism, but I wanted to mention this. I mentioned the court case last week. I wanted to mention this before we get to our questions. In 1826, Joseph Smith was actually in court where they were suing him because he had promised them to give them treasure. This is what I told you, where he said, hey, if you give me money, I'll show you where the treasure is. And then when they dug and they couldn't find it, he said, oh man, the demon moved it. If you give me more money, I'll tell you where that treasure is. He was sued in court. He was actually found guilty in court. He was put in jail for it, more than once, but put in jail for it. So this guy was known as a charlatan. He's known as a liar. He's known as a deceiver. His whole premise is the fact that you can't trust me or believe me. And then the Mormons and Mormon church are like, I love this guy. This guy sounds like someone God would pick. You know, and again, you and I have a hard time fathoming it, but so many men even gave their wives over to Joseph Smith and them. All right, let me make sure as we're getting through these questions, guys. I'll make sure I got everything. All right, so I want to hit on the Hill of Quorum. I mentioned this a little bit last time, and I guess a couple people didn't get it, so I'm going to hit it again. The Hill of Quorum was the final battle in the Book of Mormon takes place between the Nephites and the Lamanites. 150,000 of the Nephites are destroyed. Okay, these are supposed to be the good guys. And it's supposed to be on a hill in New York City, 150,000, full swords, full armor, steel, chariots with wheels. All of this stuff happened in a battle in New York City, shortly in, or around, I guess, again, you got to get the date, around 600 BC, when they got to America. And guess what? We haven't found any evidence. Not a single helmet, not a single blade, nothing. But guys, you could walk by the river and find an arrowhead. And someone's like, oh yeah, that's from this Indian that was here. You know, I got an Indian in my family. They're like, oh yeah, that was from Blackfoot. That was from the Sioux. That was from the Cherokee. That was from the Massavaca. All these different Indian tribes. But nobody in New York digging. They're actually, look, Mormons have had archaeological digs to try to find these things around this hill. And not a single thing. There's not even an old cigarette butt from a soldier that was smoking. There's not a compass from someone looking. There's not a coin from somebody flipping. There's not a string that fell off of somebody's robe. There's nothing that proves this battle ever happened. So when the Mormon church was confronted, guys, Google this stuff. Look this up. Don't take my word for it. Look it up yourself. When the Mormon church was asked about the Hill of Quorum, they said what happened was, it actually took place in Mesoamerica, which is where they originally landed. That's right South America for you guys, right under Mexico, right there where the tribes are. We're going to get to those. And he says, or they say what happened was, they picked up the hill. The battle took place in Mesoamerica. God put it in New York. So Joseph Smith could find the plates that Mormon left, and he could translate the Book of Mormon, and he could see the battle, and he could give the description. And then what God did was he picked the book of the Hill of Quorum up and put it back in Mesoamerica. So people got smart, and they said, okay, let's go dig around that hill. Guess how much evidence they found? Zero. I'm waiting for the Mormon church rapist guy to be like, oh yeah, guys, I actually made a mistake. He took it to Antarctica, somewhere over there, but because of global warming, it melted, and all the evidence went with it into the water, and now we can't prove it, just like we can't prove the plates. But I bet you it's up in heaven. That hill's up in heaven somewhere with the Quran and the plates of Mormon. Is everybody seeing the holes and stuff here, guys? It is so anti-historical, so anti-scientific, and so anti-Bible that the fact that this cult still exists today blows my mind. It's not even one of the good ones. And what I mean by that, it's not one of the ones, even the Illuminati has you tilt your head like, wow, that's pretty esoteric. It seems pretty crazy. I told you guys about walking on water. They tell you and I we can see God's Son walk on water because it's when the sun rises over the ocean. And we're like, okay, well, we know that's not necessarily true, but that's pretty cool. A little connection there. And the Mormons are like, but we got a hill of the final battle. And we're like, where? They're like, here and there. We're like, can you prove it? And they're like, no. We're like, oh, okay, well, that's not very good knowledge. That doesn't make any sense. And as you go through these contradictions with me, guys, you're going to see a lot of it doesn't make sense. Guys, if this was happening today, we would call it what it is. And it's a farce. It's a facade. They are liars. He is a liar. A lot of them are brainwashed, manipulated, and they spout the lie even further. But the ultimate thing is, guys, they've been deceived by the lie. They've been deceived by the liar. They've been deceived by all of the liars. From Joseph Smith to Brigham Young to Sidney Rigdon to Cowdery to Whitmer, you name it, they've been deceived by all of them. The only person that hasn't lied to them is Jesus. And guess who they're kept away from? Jesus. They're kept away from Jesus. You'll see at Church of Latter-day Saints, the Testament of Jesus Christ, the one person they're not going to talk about as much is Jesus. Even in communion, they don't take his blood. Do you have a question or something?
I was just going to say we should have that dude's donkey.
Huh?
We should have that dude's donkey.
Balaam's donkey?
Yeah.
What's your password, bud?
627533.
If you put it in for me and then just read the Bible verse. He's going to read the Job. It is in Job. He's going to read the Bible verse. I wanted to have it earlier and I didn't get it. While he's doing that, guys, remember the Egyptian papyrus that wrote the book of, that Joseph Smith copied the book of Abraham? They did find it and they did look at it. It is nothing but funeral rites. Nothing in the book of Abraham, which is where Joseph Smith tells you there's many gods and planets and Satan's his brother and all this stuff. Go ahead, bud.
Who has given to me that I should repay him? Everything under the heaven is mine.
Yeah. God says, who gave it to me? Now remember when he's talking to Job, he's talking to Job, I am top. I am top of the line. The rain goes where I tell it to go. The wind blows where I tell it to blow. The eagle goes where I designed it to go. There's nothing above me where God's like, let me borrow that from you. But Joseph Smith says, no, God knows. This God who claims that and said, I am the only God, told the Jews, hey, hear me, hear, O Israel, there's only one God and I'm him. And then went after all these other pagan deities. Imagine how hypocritical God would be to go after the people of the land of Canaan just to be like, oh yeah, there is more than one me. Go ahead.
There's another one in Romans that says, is quoting Job, said, who has first given to God that God should repay him.
Yeah, so Paul even reiterates it again. All right, guys, so I said we would call it what it is. Here we go, guys. My first question. Well, some of these are going to be general, and I'm going to give you guys the categories to kind of go with it. I don't expect you to remember it all. I don't expect you to write it all down. What I want you to do is absorb information as much as you can. If you hear a question like, wow, that's a good one. Remember that one. Hold on to that one, because there's going to be a lot of them. Does it help you to know all of them? It could. You know, who wouldn't have infinite ammo? You know, we always put that passcode in when we play video games. Who wouldn't want to have that? Why did the angel Nephi take the plates back to heaven? That's one of my first questions. Why did they take it back to heaven? Where was the Ten Commandments?
On a mountain.
Well, where was it when it carried with Israel? It's in the Ark of the Covenant, right? You're getting there. It was just taking a while to get where I wanted to get. It's in the Ark of the Covenant. People could see it. People could take it out. It could be read. Now, only certain people could carry and move and touch the Ark of the Covenant. Remember that. So it's not you can just walk up and be like, hey, let me see it. But they were there for people to see. They were there for the law to be read. King Josiah went back and reread the law. What Solomon wrote down was left for the world. What about Paul's epistles that he wrote in prison? Are they in heaven or are they down here with us? Yeah, we have the actual documentation that we can look at historically where Paul wrote it and then someone wrote it on your Bible and gave it to you. Their revelation has been taken back into heaven. There's nothing left of it. So if you and I were to go to, remember guys, this is like the 1840s. This is what, like a long time ago. It was 1840s. Guys like, whoop. This is the world we live in, where Jesus stood in front of the people of Israel, condemning them, and they said, show us the sign. God knows that people are going to need the proof, are going to need the evidence, and so He gave us evidence. Did He just say, trust me guys, Jesus is going to come back to life? But it didn't happen and nobody saw it? Or did people see it?
People saw it.
Did it change history?
Yeah.
500 witnesses saw it. Okay, guys, it's a known fact. Jesus resurrected. His body was missing. Somebody has it or it's not here anymore. And then Jesus shows up using it. Okay, we have the evidence of these things. Why would He take this into heaven? Now, what the plates are, guys, remember what the plates are. The plates are the thing in the hill, moved from Mesoamerica into New York City, that Joseph Smith could dig up after the 3-day battle with a frog, I might add. It's a demonic frog, I told you guys about that. And he has these plates. He has the plates to translate, and even still, he uses a seer stone and this giant Abraham Lincoln hat so that Oliver Cowdery, and David Whitmore can write down what he's saying. So it's like, if I'm translating something, when I was in typing class, we were taught to type without looking at the computer screen. Just look at the paper. And then you get better not making mistakes. And they say, how do you not make mistakes? And the teacher tells you, type what you see. Don't type what you think you know, type what you see. If the person who wrote it is spelling it wrong, it's not your error. But if you're spelling it wrong, it's your error. Type what you see. So what Joseph Smith should be doing is this. Instead, he's looking down a hat, yelling to them what to write down. Why would he do that if he had these plates? Okay, is your hand in there?
No.
Okay. So we have to, I want to answer these questions. Why did he take the plates instead of showing it to them? Joseph Smith was asked by the witnesses to see the plates with physical eyes. They only saw it with spiritual eyes. That's what they were told. Oh, you got to close your eyes and you'll feel it and you'll see it in your mind. And then later these witnesses were like, yeah, I don't believe it anymore. And they're like, how could you doubt that revelation? You saw the place with your eyes. And they're like, yeah, our spiritual eyes. The people of Israel saw the 10 Commandments. The people of Israel ate the manna. The people of Israel saw what Aaron's budding rod was able to do. The people of Israel saw what happened if you touch the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, you and I see the evidence of these items. We see the temple items being taken by Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar to Babylon, later under the Feast of Belshazzar, his great-grandson. We see these articles were real and they passed through so many hands. The law, the command, all of them passed through the hands. Does anybody remember who stole the Ark of the Covenant? David had to go back and get it? What group of people?
The Peking?
No, the Philistines. The Philistines took it. And remember, it fell in front of it. Dagon fell in front of it. The second day it was broke. Can people take the plates of Mormon? Can they take the plates of Nephi? No. Why? Because God took them up in heaven. How convenient for Joseph Smith. Again, guys, imagine if I came out and had this revelation. I told you guys all this crazy stuff, and I found these plates in my backyard. Guys, if I tell you I'm digging my backyard, I'm telling you it's probably not, because I would have Mason digging it. And Mason was digging in the backyard, and he found this book, and I wrote it, and I translated it, and what it tells you is that not only am I God, but you should give me your wives to have sex with, you should give me your money, and you should give me your power, and everything because of it. And then you would say, well, can I see what you translated? I say, oh, no, you can't see it. It's not for you. God took it up into heaven, and I can't even see it anymore. Would you join my church? Am I going to see you guys on Sunday for Jonah? Or are you like, I might pass on this guy? This guy thinks a lot of himself, doesn't it? And next one, how do they account for the parallels between the content of the Book of Mormon, and I mentioned these books, guys, the View of the Hebrews by Ethan Smith, or the manuscript found by Solomon Spaulding? How are they almost word for word, element for element, story for story, because it's plagiarism? But you want to ask them, guys. Again, you're asking. I know I can get past it. I'm going to give you the answers. I'm telling you to ask and wait for the answers. I'm not waiting for the answer right now. Okay? You got to have the answer in your pocket ready to go. Okay? But the question is why? Because it's plagiarism. Throughout these questions, I'm going to ask the same question of why does Joseph Smith quote directly the King James Bible, the Elizabethan style, that's the writing, the Middle English language, that's the ye, the thou, the thou, he uses those wrong, I might add. Why does he quote from that translation directly? Okay, again, now these are one of the questions that Bill Schneeblen asked the Mormon presidents in the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, which is like the holiest people on earth to the Mormon church, I might add. Why did he quote the King James Bible? The reason this is a big deal, guys, is because the Book of Mormon was written by people claiming to be descendants of Joseph from the tribe of Joseph and his sons Manasseh and Ephraim that come into America. Okay? They're coming to America. Oh, sorry, lost my spot. They're coming to America to escape, I guess, the persecution from Babylon. We really don't know. And God puts them on a boat, and they come. They are Old Testament Jews that come into a modern American world. So when Joseph Smith quotes for them a Bible that has not been written yet by a king who doesn't exist yet in a language that isn't used in the time of Joseph Smith, this is what I told you guys. This is finding a Corvette in a pyramid. It's an anachronism that is not a logical anachronism. In prophecy, when God said arrows, and Lehi and all them were like, oh, those are missiles later for the end of the world. Guess what God meant when He said arrows, guys? Didn't I tell you, guess what He meant by arrows?
Arrows.
He meant arrows. You guys got it. When He said chariots, what did He mean? When He says horses, what does He mean? When He says horse-drawn chariots, is He saying tank? No, He's not. Now, if there was anybody in the world that could drop an anachronism like that, it would be God Almighty. He would say to the people in the book, there's going to be a day when a chariot driven by fire and smoke and machines and organisms and cranks and all these things together and makes a whirring noise and a whistling noise and moves without the animals and all this stuff, they would be blown away. And you and I would be like, he's talking about World War I. You and I would be blown away. But He doesn't do that, does He? There is no anachronism in here that doesn't make sense. The prophecies were fulfilled the way they were supposed to be fulfilled. Okay, so when they say, hey, thee, thou, thy, all these things, and they're using anachronisms. Joseph Smith quotes more than once William Shakespeare's language idioms. Things that you and I take for granted as if they were just common language, are not. They were written by, whoever Shakespeare is, written by him in his plays that became part of common language, just like you and I have with slang terms. Every generation has slang terms that the generation before them doesn't really know what all of them mean. Okay? If not, ask the people below you. They'll give you the brain rot and all these different things. And my generation did it to the generations before us, and I'm sure their generation had stuff. You know, you had the flapper girls with these different phrases. Things like that wouldn't mean things to people that didn't know them. And yet here Joseph Smith has these people, not him, who would be familiar with King James, who would be familiar with William Shakespeare, who would be familiar with these language idioms, who would be familiar with these books that he plagiarized. He quotes it as if it's prophecy. That's what's key, guys. I hope I'm not losing you there. This is called plagiarism. And again, we know because he even uses the thee, the thou, the thouest. He uses them wrong. Ye isn't for everybody and everything. There's a ye and a you and a ya and all these different ye's. And Joseph Smith's like, I just use all of them whenever I want. There have been people way smarter than me, for way longer than me, that have torn this book apart, proving that these languages were anachronistic. Which means that he's either outside of time, or he's a liar. And it's plagiarism. And I'm telling you, it's the second one. The Book of Mormon, and the Book of Mormon in the Article of Faith, Part 8, or number 8, it says, we believe the Bible to be the Word of God, and as far as it is translated correctly. And then they say, and we believe the Book of Mormon to be the Word of God. My question for them is, why do they add if it's translated correctly? Now again, guys, remember, the Mormons and Islam, they'll say, hey, God's Word can never be corrupted. Except the Old Testament was corrupted, and the New Testament corrupted, but the Quran can never be corrupted because it's the Word of God. And the Mormons say the Word of God cannot be corrupted, it's the Word of God, except the Old Testament, New Testament was corrupted. What's not corrupted is the Book of Mormon, the Pearl of Great Price, and the Doctrine and Covenants. God cannot have His Word corrupted. Isn't it convenient that their Word is full and absolute, and everybody else's has flaws, and yet they're still Part 3? Remember, they're Part 3. Imagine watching the Toy Story trilogy. I'm going to lose some of you guys, and that's okay, because the rest of you guys hopefully can hang in there just a little bit. Imagine watching Toy Story, where Buzz and Woody meet. And in the second movie, Buzz and Woody become even closer. And in the third movie, it's all of a sudden, it's just Woody and Jessie. Buzz was never there. They're like, no, those movies were messed up, and there was a corruption, and there was an error, and it was never about Buzz Lightyear. And you and I are like, wait a minute, wasn't it a reference for the Western going from the space movement and people liking these toys and not liking these toys? It don't make sense. And the only time it ever contradicts the Bible is if it's contradicting the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon says more than one God, and our Bible says one God. They're like, yeah, your book's corrupt. But they'll quote everything else. Again, some of the greatest Mormon scripture is quoted in the Book of Mormon comes straight out of the Holy Bible. So why do they add the phrase as far as it is translated correctly? Go look at how many times the Book of Mormon had to be translated and retranslated because of the errors and the inconsistency and the misspelling and the improper use of a city or a town or a name. Guys, the Book of Mormon is so specific in the giving of the names of the witnesses. It tells you John the Baptist's names. Even the prophet Malachi didn't do that for you. John the Baptist identified himself for you in the way he dressed and what he said and what he was doing, and when he claimed the name for the Lamb of God, he said, this is him. The Book of Mormon says John the Baptist, Jesus Christ, David Whitmore. It's going to give you their names specifically. No other book, God's never done that before. And again, they had to go back and they had to fix it. God knew these prophets were going to eventually leave the Mormon church, and He chose them. Did Peter leave Jesus after he told him He loved him on the river at the end of the book of John, as I know? Or he died crucified upside down? Did John get banished to the Isle of Patmos, or did he leave Jesus? I'm asking you guys, what about Thomas? Was Thomas killed for the gospel, or did he leave Jesus? What about Matt? He left Jesus?
No,
I don't know. You tell me, you're taking the teaching stick here. None of them left Jesus. All but John died a horrible death. John eventually would die, but not because of the hands of the Roman church. Not a one of them left. It doesn't say Mary Magdalene left. It doesn't say Mary, the mother of Jesus, left. It doesn't say James, the brother of Jesus, left. It doesn't say if the prisoner that Paul converted left. It never tells us. Now, it will say people left the fold in the ministry. It will tell you that there are people that left. People that were not apostles. People that were not prophets of the church. Has everybody seen that? People that did not have authority. Now, does that mean that every church member that had a gift couldn't leave the church? No. They were coming in and out of the church too. That's how you knew who was true and who was real. But Paul never left. The one who said he saw Jesus on the road to Damascus. Imagine later, he's like, I'm not sure if I really believe that. I'm going to go back to killing Christians. And then you and I today, even today, after Paul goes back to killing Christians, quote him in the book of Romans. How stupid would we look? How foolish would that be? How much damage would that do to the doctrine? If we're like, well, Paul believed it at one time. Paul at one time was very passionate about what happened. And then later, didn't Paul say it didn't happen? Like, yeah, but he really believed it did at one time too. Well, then there's two schools of Paul then. The before, that should be three. Before, during, and after. We don't have that. After Jesus was the last one. There was nothing after that. If the Book of Mormon is true, why has the Mormon church changed it? They've changed verses in it. They changed phrases in it. Again, if you don't have to fix a book that's perfect, this is what I got for you guys. How did Joseph Smith carry the golden plates of the Book of Mormon? And how did the witnesses lift them so easily? The plates weigh 230 pounds of gold, which is the density of 19.3, which is 1,204.7 pounds per cubic foot. The plates were 7 by 8 by 6. 7 by 8 by 6. Guys, my board's not even that big. Okay? Is everybody seeing that? And 230 pounds. And this dude's just like, hey, I got mine. You know, it's like the guy at church that wants to get as many chairs and impress the girls. Like, look how many chairs I can carry all at one time. And then the rest of us that used to do that, we don't do that now because we're either married or we don't care because we're going to let you guys carry as many chairs as you want to impress the girls. I'm going to probably do as less as I can. I don't want to marry again. I'm going to impress mom with any chairs. But that's a big plate. For some old man or some man, some skinny guy. Guys, it's not like Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'll carry the plates and I'll be back with the plate. No, these are normal people carrying these giant plates. Now, I told you guys in the beginning, this is where you got to be careful. What do you think the Mormon answer for that is? The element
of God.
Of God. God gave them the ability to carry the plates. God gave them the ability to lift it up. Can you and I contend with the ability of God? No. But we can contend with the logic of God. Again, were the 10 plates so heavy Moses couldn't pick them up and lift them, or was he able to carry them so much? Remember, he broke them. You know, dropping these plates would seem to do more damage than anything, especially full-on gold. Full-on, you know how hard gold is? Gold doesn't just break or crack very easily, if at all. There's a reason it's got to be melted, okay? Why do Mormons emphasize the part of the word of wisdom? That's one of the books. And ignore the part forbidding the eating of meat except in winter, cold, or famine. According to Doctrine and Covenants 89, 12, and 13, they are not supposed to eat meat except in winter, cold, or famine. How many vegan Mormons do we hear about all the time? Not many. I know people that are watching the documentaries. Got one lady at work that sees that the Mormons, called the Sister Wives or whatever, the show about Mormon wives. where they try to get around having soda, which they're actually not supposed to have caffeine. It's not just soda, it's supposed to have caffeine at all. But they get around it. Well, so do these people. They say, oh, we can eat meat. Again, Joseph Smith's laws mean nothing. And again, they say, well, we have a living prophet. If you have a living prophet, do you really need his book? The dead prophet's book. Let me ask it that way. If you have a living prophet with authority, do you really need the dead prophet's book that has no authority? What do you guys think? If we had modern apostles, are you going to study all the 12 apostles? Guys, I don't know if you guys don't go to necessarily Bible college, and maybe you in Bible class, but I've had to memorize Scripture. That's not as easy and said and done as people think it is, especially in Bible college. You've got to remember a whole lot of Scripture depending on what subject you're in. And memorize them. They don't want you to just be like, oh, I'll flip to the Bible, like I'm not going to have my Bible with me. They want you to know it off the top of your head. Okay? I'm not going to do that if what they said doesn't matter and everything that they're saying is all that matters. I wouldn't memorize a thing. I would just wait for the next thing to change. In Luke 23:44, it says the darkness was on the earth for 3 hours. And through Nephi 8, 19, and 23, it says when Christ died, there was darkness over the land for 3 days. And how did Luke and them get that wrong? Mary was like, was it 3 days? It felt like 3 hours. I don't really remember. And John's like, I don't know. I was only out here at the cross for about 3 hours. Maybe I was out here for 3 full days. 3 suns up, 3 suns down. Somebody seeing that? Is that something you get wrong pretty easily? No. That's a drastic difference. So either Luke and them were right and Nephi was wrong, which means Nephi's not a very good prophet. Does anybody remember if Nephi said he can be wrong? Did Nephi say that? Did he say in the Book of Mormon? Did I read that he said he could be wrong? I did. Yes, I did. He said, hey, I can be wrong. I'm just a human. You guys remember that in Genesis, right? When Moses wrote that, okay, what do I know? Book of Leviticus, what do I know? Jesus, hey, I'm not necessarily up there right now, so what do I know? I'm living on human terms. I could be wrong, but I might not be. So walk the narrow lane just in case. Want to get that planet, don't you? Again, he could have mentioned a lot of this stuff. Let me make sure I'm getting these good ones, guys. Joseph Smith said that there are men living on the moon dressed like Quakers that would live to be nearly 1,000 years old. We ever find the man on the moon? You know that old joke? Now, imagine this, guys. So at a time when people are into astrology and ancient aliens, which they got from the Illuminati, which is the belief in the demigods or the gods or the demons of the ancient world, which is the beings they travel through in light, that's all Nephilimic and all this stuff, they believed in aliens. So why wouldn't a Joseph Smith, who's not a real prophet, intermingle his culture and his own worldview? He's like, oh yeah, God told me there were people up on the moon that we never found that lived to be 1,000 years old. Okay? And if he's wrong about people living on the moon, are we really going to trust him about heaven and hell and baptism and sin and death? Again, he lost me a little while ago, but after the people on the moon, I think I got to go after that. And Joseph Smith prepared 14 articles of faith. They originally had, or they have 13 now. Number 11 has been omitted since, actually for a couple years, a long time. And you can look it up in Volume 2 of Joseph Smith Begins His Work, page 160, where they had it removed from the articles of faith. So instead of 14, we have 13. The article they had to remove was religious freedom. Originally, you could worship, even if you weren't a Mormon, freely within the Mormons. Now they're like, no one's going to worship freely around us. Well, who does that sound like? Does it sound like Islam? Yeah, it sure does, doesn't it? Again, Mormons aren't even like, you got to pay a tax, which is good because their taxes are expensive. You want to talk about taxation without representation. Why did the Nauvoo house not stand forever? According to the Doctrine and Covenants 124, 56 to 60, Joseph Smith says the Nauvoo Legion, the Navus will stand forever, and they're gone. The house is gone. In fact, they're not even in Illinois. They all moved to Salt Lake City, Utah, Brigham Young. So Joseph Smith is wrong, guys. Over and over and over, he's wrong. And we're like, was he wrong about the hill? Yeah. Was he wrong about the planet? And then all of a sudden, we're talking to the Mormons. We're like, yeah, but was he wrong about the planets? We're like, no. Was he wrong about Jesus? They're like, no. Was he wrong about baptism? They're like, no. He gets everything provable wrong and everything that you have to take on faith. That's what he gets 100% right. Again, guys, we call it what it is. Imagine like Benny Hinn or somebody standing up here trying to tell us that these days. You and I would be up in arms. Imagine Doug, even Doug just preaching the local Winchester sermon, talking about some of this stuff and then just being absolutely wrong. You and I would be like, he's not a preacher, he's not a prophet, he's not an evangelist, he's not even smart. Called him a hillbilly in my conversion. Shout out to anybody who gets that reference. He truly would be that hillbilly that I talked to that night. How can a man who is not a descendant of Aaron hold the Aaronic priesthood? What do you have to be in order to hold the Aaronic priesthood? Children of who?
God.
No.
Aaron.
Aaron. And what tribe is that? Little gold star here. Not Eli's the father. The tribe.
Of Judah?
No, they got a book in the Old Testament. Levi. Tribe of Levi. Leviticus. Okay, you had to be of the tribe of Levi. So not only Aaron, you had to be of Levi. Do you guys remember who they're descendants of? I said it earlier. One of the 12 tribes. This dude got out of Egypt, or got sold slave into Egypt, and then he got out.
Oh, Joseph.
Joseph. They believe they're of the tribe of Joseph or his sons Manasseh and Ephraim. Remember, there's two different theories. And neither of them are Aaron or Levi, are they? See, are you guys seeing this? So how can they hold a priesthood of Aaron, not being descendants of Aaron? How can they hold a Levitical priesthood, not being priests of Levi? Remember, they're all about authority. They have no authority of this particular priesthood. Gold star, who's Melchizedek, and how do we know it?
Jesus.
Jesus, how do we know it?
Doesn't he say it?
Oh, who said it? Jesus? He's like, I'm Melchizedek. Paul tells us in Hebrews, Melchizedek has neither beginning nor end. He has no earthly father, no mother, no lineage in the same way. I would say mother, I might have added that one. But he has no beginning and no end. He's a priest forever. Okay? Who has no beginning or end?
God.
God. So Melchizedek has to be who?
God.
The question is he God the Father or God the Son?
God.
Who did Aaron meet?
God the Son.
He met God the Son. Do you remember what he brought him? Taking in communion. He brought him bread and wine. There's the typology that was there. Abraham had the first Lord's Supper with the Lord. Okay? Guys, when we have this authority, they have this authority they claim that is not theirs. They cannot be a part of the priesthood of Melchizedek because there's only one priest and he's it. They cannot be the priest of the other two because they're not descendants. Since Mormonism teaches that only God the Father had a physical body at the time of Adam when he was created, why did God say, let us make man in our image rather than in mine? He's the only one with a physical body. Everything else is spirit. He's like, let's make man in our image. Well, no, it would just be God's image, right? You guys see, again, you got to pick up the holes. You got to pick up the contradictions. You got to let them see where it's at. Because I want to know these answers. You want me to be a Mormon, you're going to have to do a whole lot more than tell me that I'm going to have a spooky dream or tell me I'm going to feel the burning in my bosom. Remember, you have the spooky Mormon hell dream, which will tell you that you're a true Mormon. If Jesus was conceived as a result of a physical union between God and Mary, how was Jesus born of a virgin? You might want to take a stab at that right now. You might want to try to defend the Mormons, maybe take the battle flag in for them. How is she born a virgin if they actually had sex? Now again, some of you guys are a little young, and I'm not here to tell you how it works, but I'll give you a little bit of a rundown, okay? Anybody's ever seen Dumbo knows how babies are born. The stork flies in, drops them a little parachute plate, and they float down to whichever parent they belong to, animal or human. And if the stork gets a little bit late, they send the specific stork, which is what they did with Jumbo. She brought him Dumbo, and they sing a happy birthday song. That's how babies are born. No, you guys know how babies are born. If not, you can ask an adult next to you. Okay? If Mary was a virgin, that means she hadn't had sex yet. So if she had sex with God, that means she had sex, which means if she didn't have sex yet, she can't be a virgin. And then they're the ones, the people that try to say, well, the word virgin didn't actually mean virgin. What it meant was that he would be born of a maiden. A maiden. Imagine that. God's like, I'm going to send my son, and you're going to know because he's going to be born of a woman. And you're like, okay, yeah, we get that. Aren't we all? How many didn't come from their mom? Let me say it. You came from me first, but you came out of mom. Does anybody know the verse in Scripture that anchors us to Mary being the only one involved? The verse is going to be coming up Sunday for me. Genesis chapter 3, born the seed of the woman. It's almost like God knew somebody was going to screw this up one day, or try to. It's almost like he knew that there was a devil from hell that was going to try to get you to go there with him, doesn't it? So he said, hey guys, just so, the very first prophecy that he ever made was so specific, he said, born the seed of the woman. Which means that Jesus could not be born as we are all first, the seed of the man. Which means that if God had sex with Mary, he would be born, Jesus was born of the seed of God first, then the seed of Mary, which would be the same birth that you and I have, and they would just call her a maiden. Just a maiden giving birth. That's going to shock the whole world. What do you mean there's a young girl giving birth? Are you kidding me? Is that going to get the whole world's attention? Or someone that's never had sex? Now let me ask you guys a little bit further. Did Joseph think Mary was a virgin?
Yes.
He was told by the angel, but did he think at first she was still a virgin? Remember, what was he going to do quietly? He was going to put her away, right?
Divorce her, yeah.
Now Mary could have said, hey Joseph, it's cool, me and God had sex. And Joseph would have probably called it what it was, and he would have been like, you know what, I'm going to leave, because I guarantee you that person you had sex with is probably a neighbor nearby. It didn't. The angel came to Joseph and said, hey, what's in Mary is of God, not from God, not God's seed. God didn't do it with her and give it to her. He said that she was, Jesus is conceived by what? Somebody give it to me. There's a player in here. Holy Spirit.
Immaculate conception.
Immaculate conception is what they believe that Mary was born sinless. But it was the Holy Spirit. It was a spiritual conception. I think that's where you just got the word conception mixed in there. So if Jesus is born of physical sex, then she's not a virgin. My question also then is, they believe that we're all children of God and Heavenly Mother. Remember, God's up there having sex with all kinds of women and just giving birth to children left and right. And that's where we all come from. As he has sex, they come down, they come out of the man, and they go into the woman. What was Adam born out of?
Dust.
Dust.
Yeah, it was dust. But where did Eve come from?
Adam's rib.
Why would God do that if he has like all these extra spiritual children? He could just be like Oprah, you get a child, and you get a child. Look under your seat, everybody gets a child. Why would he do that? It's almost like God can create anything out of anything that he wants, and he's not using just these leftover sex children that he's had. He literally made them out of the dirt. We go back to the dirt. That's where our bodies go back to. How did Nephi, with a few men on a continent, build a temple that was like Solomon, who needed 163,300 workmen and 7 years to build? That's how many men he needed, and how much time he needed. And the Nephites and them were able to do it in less time. Remember, guys, they only had a couple hundred people. Okay, a couple hundred. You couldn't fill a stadium with the amount of people that landed here. Okay, keep that in mind. Okay, and I gave you guys the records where some of them believe it was even less than that. They believe it was about 60. And then if they split, maybe it was into 30. And if they split into 30, we would have to assume that 15 maybe men and 15 women. We wouldn't know, which would give us maybe 7 men, 8 men. We wouldn't know how to break it up. And we don't even know if that means children. So even when they fight these big wars, we got maybe 60 people or a couple hundred. When they fight these giant battles, we got maybe a couple hundred or maybe 60 people. It doesn't make sense. And the temple could not be built like that. Now, what do you think they answered for the temple? Remember what we used earlier?
Element of God.
The God element. Now, did Solomon have a God element? Couldn't he have used it? But God told Solomon what to do and how to build. Did God build Noah the ark, or did Noah build it?
No, built it.
Does anybody know if the Nephi, well actually they would be the Josephites at that time, does anybody know if they built the ark or if it was built for them in the Book of Mormon? I'm looking at you because I thought maybe you said you was going to try to read it. Have you got a chance to read it at all or look into it or Google just like the summary?
I think we
God built the ark for them. So there you got a boat that was being prepared by Noah and a boat that was prepared by God for these people. It's God literally doing it for them. It's like God was like, I can't rely on Noah, or I can't wait this long, or I can't. It's like God's trying to speed up His process. What it is plagiarism. It's the same stories over and over and over, and they can't make them make sense. Did Solomon have more than a couple hundred, more than 60 people of Israel? What do you guys think? Hundreds of thousands of Israelites. Remember how they marched, guys? Remember they marched in a giant cross? They're winning battles against these giant empires. They didn't do that with just 5 people. So when they built this temple, the Bible tells us how many people it took. And it didn't say that God did it. It said that they did it. So how did they do it? My big question is, how did they build this temple? Does anybody want to guess my second question? Where is it? Where's the temple? If it came down, where's the evidence? If it came down, where's the footage? Or not the footage, the foundation. If it came down, where's the records? Where's the records even in the Native Americans or the Mesoamerican records that say that a temple... Guys, remember how big Solomon's temple is? It's not just a castle. His temple was huge. It's a mini city. When they rebuilt it under Zerubbabel, which is the New Testament temple, Google that picture, guys. It's huge. Titus Vespasian destroyed it in 70 AD, the historical temple of Zerubbabel, and Nebuchadnezzar destroyed Solomon's. Okay? But we have proof that it was there. In fact, there's the Arch of Titus It's over where the Temple of Solomon stood. There's all these different references in history from other sources that talk about when that temple came down. And there's nothing mentioned about this temple. Why was Joseph Smith still practicing polygamy in October 1843 when he got his revelation in July 1843 commanding the practice of it? He's saying, no, we don't do polygamy, and no, I'm not doing it secretly, when he was already commanded to practice it. Why would he be ashamed of God's message, God's gospel? Why would he be afraid? What do you think is going to happen if he comes out and publicly tells people, I'm having sex with your wives?
They'll probably kill him.
What happened to him in Illinois, in the prison, in Carthage, Illinois? You know? He was shot to death. Either by disgruntled husbands, or some people believe that the rings were Masonic. And again, you guys can Google that history yourself. But that's exactly why. It was over polygamy. But just like with the church, guys, he was told not to join the church. And then after even being told that by God, he joined the church. He was said, I'm not practicing polygamy. After being told by God, you have to practice polygamy, everybody has to go to heaven, or nobody's going to make it. God rejected the fig leaf aprons of Adam and Eve in Genesis 3:21. My question is, why do Mormons memorialize the fall? By using the leaf in their temple ceremonies. Remember coming over here, guys, we did the whole thing in the drama of the Garden of Eden. Does anybody remember whose priesthood they're baptized into? Whose priesthood are the Mormons baptized into in the Salt Lake City, Utah temple? Somebody remember? He's on the play. They're doing a play. Remember I did my play? Adam and Eve are up there and they're talking to somebody. Who are they talking to in the garden? There you go. His name is what?
Lucifer?
Lucifer. They got his name, Lucifer. He's got an apron with all these Masonic, esoteric symbols. I told you guys, they're symbols of the faculties of Abric, which is where you and I get abracadabra. It's this magical term. And the people see that they're wearing Lucifer's apron. And he makes a comment that the apron represents my priesthood and my power. And they're baptized into his priesthood and power. Why would God make them? Remember, he didn't let them keep the leaves. He gave them what? We got this last week. A couple people got this in class last week.
The animal.
Yeah, he gave them animal skin. Why are they baptized in the leaf? What does the leaf represent? Rebellion. What did the animal skin represent? Gold star. Sacrifice. I'll take it. I was looking for atonement, judges. We're going to take that, Chris. Sacrifice. Okay? Why do you think that they want to remember the leaves? Do they want to remember the atonement? Or what does the atonement bring them close to?
God.
Keep going. Brings them close to who?
Jesus.
Jesus. Do they want to get that close to Jesus other than his name?
No.
No. That's why they don't take communion that way. They're not going to wear the priesthood garb. They're going to wear Lucifer's garb. Because they're fulfilling what lie? I said up there, the truth restored. Joseph Smith, there's a book, by the way, called Truth Restored, about Joseph Smith restoring the truth. And what truth was he restoring? You shall be as gods. And that's exactly what Lucifer wanted. And again, guys, that is the Illuminati in a nutshell. Can anybody tell me the doctrine, the Luciferian doctrine, what it's really called by the Illuminati, little gold star, that the Mormon church follows? He's a Greek god, you know his name. Gets his liver pecked out by a raven. He's tied to a rock every day by Zeus. Prometheus. Called the Promethean doctrine. Yes, I get that gold star.
Yeah, but you already knew it, though.
No. The judges, they're going to take it. How do you explain the fact that 2 Nephi 16:2 is a direct copy of the King James Version of the Bible and Isaiah 6:2? Again, guys, he's not quoting just the Old Testament, which was written in Old Testament written in Hebrew. He's quoting the King James Bible written in English. He's quoting an English Bible as if it's being written by these Jews, or these Israelites, of the tribe of Joseph. Did the Hebrews speak English?
No.
What did they speak, guys?
Hebrew.
Hebrew and Aramaic, right? So why are they speaking English when he's writing? Remember, they're like, well, Joseph Smith, no. Nephi wrote it. Nephi wrote it. Joseph Smith translated it. So Nephi should be speaking Hebrew. That also comes up when they say about the Reformed Egyptian. Why would the plates be in Reformed Egyptian if they're Hebrews? Okay, none of it makes sense. So the Book of Mormon mentions silk, it mentions animals, it mentions everything that wasn't in the New World. And it doesn't mention the things that are in the New World. Okay, I'm not going to get too deep into that. You guys can look at that already. If the Nephites landed in the Americas that already had millions of inhabitants in the land with large cities and infrastructure, why are these people not mentioned? The Book of Mormon makes it seem like they showed up and nobody was here. And that they're going to be, the branch of the four groups, the Mexica, Aztec, the Mayan. I can't remember the fourth one, but it'll come to me. If not, we can Google it. I might even have it written down over here, guys. But where are they? They show up. Now remember, guys, there's two schisms. Okay, stay with me. I know this is a lot, guys. Two schisms. Okay, where they say the Indians are descendant of Joseph Smith. Of Joseph, not Joseph Smith, of Joseph of the tribe of Israel. They are the descendants. And then another schism says, no, they're not the descendants of Joseph, but later they were converted into Mormonism and their skin color was going to change. Which, by the way, neither happened. When they showed up, there was supposed to, at that time, they would have already had people here. We have history does not have eras or epochs missing. Where the Book of Mormon can say, right here where that timeline's missing, that's where we fit in. There's not a timeline where we're like, well, we're missing a group of people. You know, there's a temple missing and there's factories. None of it's missing. So where are all of these people? The Book of Mormon indicates the continent was empty at the time, 2 Nephi 1:8. One wonders if the knowledge they had of the land of the Native Americans had already been there for thousands of years. So how can we find in history they were already established, even at the timeline the Book of Mormon gives, and the Book of Mormon says, well, no one was here. History says they were, Mormon says there wasn't. So somebody's wrong. It's either the empirical evidence or it's not. And again, there's a schism where even the Mormons get it wrong. One of the Bill Schneeblen questions, by the way. Why isn't the art of the supposed Book of Mormon cultures portray the existence of metallurgical projects and metallurgical activity? Again, guys, look at all the history of the world. You'll see different sculptures of different historical figures and all this. How much Mormon artwork do you think we have historically that shows these people living their lives all up to, again, to present day? Remember, they didn't just go away. They're still alive, present day, scattered out and few between, you might add. Not every Mormon is of the tribe of Joseph, adopted into the Joseph Smith family of Mormons. Okay? But we would have seen this progression built up, and we don't. We don't see statues, we don't see pictures, we don't see paintings, there's no books, there's no poems, there's no ode to the Battle of the Hill of Corum that even the New Yorkers outside of it. But you and I can read about the Norse wars and we weren't there. You and I can read about the odes of the Greek poets and we weren't there. These people were there that built these epochs of times. I told you guys about the book series, A History and Art. Get the book, A History and Art, and you can follow history through art until the Book of Mormon. And then, like I said, guys, when they have these paintings, like, oh yeah, this one was really there, you don't see metallurgy. You don't see this giant temple being built with other people. I told you about the animals, guys. You can look at the animals. There's a lot of them. I'm not going to do that. Plow agriculture. They mention barley in Alma 11:7. It mentions wheat in Mosiah 9:9. But yet we knew that stuff was not on that continent in that time period. So they're using things that do not exist yet. Not Joseph Smith. The Nephites are using things that don't exist yet. They have smelters and things that don't exist yet. They're using metal and steel that do not exist yet. Okay? The Book of Mormon geography is a big one, guys. We know where Jerusalem is, Bethlehem, Nazareth. We can go to those cities even to this day. We can go to the tomb where Jesus' body disappeared. We can go to the pool in Siloam. We can pretty much go everywhere except the temple that hasn't been rebuilt and probably never will be. But even if it does, it's not the temple we're looking for. We can't find these Mormon cities. We can't find these Mormon temples. We can't find anything. We cannot find the geography, let alone the topography of the Mormons. This is a quote. It says, no Book of Mormon location is known with reference to modern topography. Biblical archaeology can be studied because we know where Jerusalem is. We know where Jericho was, and we know where, but we do not know where Zamimuth is, or Bountiful, nor any location for that matter where they were or where they are. A concentration on geography should be the first order of business, but we have already seen that 20 years of such appeal has left us empty-handed. This is Professor D.F. Green, and he's a respected Mormon archaeologist on page 19. Can't find any of it, guys. Imagine being a Mormon archaeologist and coming up with nothing. Now, guys, remember, some of these people that went out to disprove the Bible are the ones that found David's kingdom, are the ones that find the walls of Jericho being torn down. In fact, the archaeologists that did Jericho found exactly what Joshua said we would find. They didn't find any idols. God told them to destroy them all. They found fire. Joshua was told to burn everything. You guys remember that? All of this came true. And yet we have this Mormon archaeologist, poor man, bless his heart, who's going out to try to prove the Book of Mormon. And he says right off the bat, the topography doesn't make sense. It doesn't match. Okay? We get this great description of these lands in the Bible, and in Mormonism, we get some of the mentions of these cities, but they never compare to what we see in the New World. It's, you and I, they should be pretty much telling us what we would see, from sea to shining sea, the redwood forest, all of these things that we have in all of our patriotic songs should be mentioned in the Book of Mormon, and it's not. None of it's there. It's like they didn't know where they were, or it's like Joseph Smith didn't know exactly what it looked like. Remember, guys, we learned a whole lot more after the 1840s, I'll tell you that. So why isn't, this leads to this one, why isn't the terrain of Central America described? Why is it? Where are the Rocky Mountains? Where's the Mississippi River? Where is any of it? Where's the trees of Jamestown? Where's Plymouth Rock? Where is any of it? None of it's mentioned. It's all these cities that no longer exist, if they ever existed, which they didn't, but they don't exist in the real world. Whereas when we read stuff like Jamestown, and we read stuff like John Smith and the real story of Pocahontas and John Rolfe and what really took place at Plymouth Rock and all this stuff, you and I can go there and we can say, oh yeah, Jamestown did used to have all kinds of trees. Oh yeah, the James River is still there. We're not like, oh yeah, this dry spot desert, that's where the river would have been, and over here's the temple. No, we have proof these things were there. In fact, the Native Americans have accounts, by the way, of John Smith and them when they showed up in England. We're not going to get into Pocahontas and stuff. But what I'm saying is there's historical evidence of these people that interacted. Does anybody know if Columbus said what the New World looked like? Yeah, he did. Amerigo Vespucci talked about what the New World looked like? Yeah, he did. Everybody was like, look at what the New World looks like. And Mormons like, we're not going to even touch on it. Why is it that numerous Latter-day Saints books and papers describe that the proposed Book of Mormon locations and cities, and they call it the narrow neck of land, yet no city identified as being Nephite, Lamanite, or Jaredite has ever been found? So it goes even deeper. There's nothing in this entire continent, Mesoamerica or otherwise, that associates with Nephites, Lamanites, or Jaredites. There's nothing hidden in the Native American tongue. There's nothing hidden in the Native American writings. There's nothing hidden in the Native American cultures. There's nothing hidden in the Mayans. There's nothing hidden in the Aztec. There's nothing hidden in the Mexica. There's nothing hidden in the Zapotec. Told you guys I would think of it. Zapotec. Okay, those are your four groups: the Mexica, Zapotec, the Mayan, and the Aztec. All four we know existed. All four, child sex, all kinds of horrible stuff. Watch The Road to El Dorado. Shout out anybody seen that movie. And you'll get a glimpse of the Mayans and the Aztecs and these people when Conquistador shows up and these people came to conquer them. We don't see anything Nephite, Lamanite, or Jaredite. Why didn't any of the places the Book of Mormon names still exist when Columbus arrived? Does anybody remember Columbus got there? When he sailed the ocean blue? 1492. Columbus sailed the sea. So as he gets here in 1490. Remember, all of the Book of Mormon, not Joseph Smith, he comes in later. All of the Book of Mormon took place already. So when Columbus shows up, he should find a bunch of white-skinned Mormons, and he doesn't. What does he find?
Indians.
A bunch of dark-skinned Native Americans. Anybody remember what color skin he thought they had?
Red.
Yeah, there you go. He said they have red skin. Shout out to anybody that's getting all of those different references. Peter Pan, the dude's like straight up painted red. He thought they had red skin. They weren't black, they weren't brown, and they definitely were not white. He said they were red. Now I guess we would call them commander, but I guess we'll get to that later. Okay, why in the Book of Mormon, I'm sorry, let me get this down here, guys. I'm not trying to rush, I just want to keep you here all day. I guess it'll be all night. Did the Book of Mormon take place outside of Mesoamerica? This is one I took from Bill Schneeblen. The history of the church records an incident in June 1834 in which Joseph Smith identified a skeleton found in an Indian burial ground in Illinois, and the visions of the past were opened by my understanding by the Spirit of the Almighty. I discovered the person whose skeleton was before us was a white Lamanite, a large, thick-set man and a man of God. His name was Zelph, who was not known from the hill of Cumorah or in the eastern sea to the Rocky Mountains. Now we're going to mention the Rocky Mountains, don't we? Bill Schneeblen asked the question to the apostles, the quorum of the 12 apostles. Did it take place outside of Mesoamerica? So remember, Book of Mormon shows up Mesoamerica. Remember where that's at? If not, Google it on a map, you can see it. And then they come up later to America. But first, they're all down here. Okay? But Joseph Smith finds an Indian burial ground. He finds a body way up in Illinois. Happened to be where he was at, I might add. And he knows his name was Zelph. It sounds like somebody's just making up names for You guys remember like Buck Rogers? That one guy died, by the way, recently. Buck Rogers, you got all these weird scientific names. Anybody's ever watched Star Trek? You get weird scientific names. Anybody's ever speaking Klingon? You get all this weird stuff. Joseph Smith is just like that. This Indian man's name was Zelph. That's funny. We've never heard a Native American use that name ever. You know, we got all kinds of names. Hey guys, we're not just like talking about, oh, we got Chief Squatting Rainbow. They really did have names in their native tongues, in their dialect. You guys study, what's his name, Davy Crockett. Study what Davy Crockett and David Bowie did to fight for the rights of Native Americans against Congress, especially in the southern states at that time. You know, Custer, one of them warned Custer, I don't remember which one, but they warned Custer to stay away from the Indians. And did he do it? No, what happened to Custer? Yeah, he did, didn't he? He died by the white-skinned Indians, I'm assuming. By the red-skinned Indians. He was killed. They were, who was it? Was it the Sioux? Yeah, it was the Sioux, wasn't it, that killed Custer, I believe. If not, you fact-check me there. Guys, I'm only human. I could be wrong. You know, I'm a lesser god, if anything. Just being facetious, shout out to him, I guess those references. But Bill Schneeblen asked them that, and they couldn't answer the question. How did the Indian get there? How did he show up all the way over there? Why don't archaeologists theorize any Hebrew-Egyptian linkage or influences into Mesoamerica? We can't find any Egyptian influence in Mesoamerica. And we're going to come back to that one, guys. I am almost finished, trust me. Why are Greek names such as Licinius, Timothy, Jonas, Alpha and Omega, and the word Christ used in a book that should have absolutely no Greek influence? Remember, at the time that Josephites left to get on the boat that God made them and took them over to Mesoamerica, they were all what? They're Hebrew. I'm helping you again, guys. I know I've had you for a long time. They're Hebrew. And yet, he's got them doing all this stuff with Egyptians and Greek. They have no influence of Egyptian, and they should have no knowledge. The Greek culture didn't even exist yet. Alexander the Great, Philip of Macedonia, none of them were here yet. And yet, the Book of Mormon, Nephi, remember Nephi, is calling Jesus Christ. Meaning what?
Little Christ?
No.
Christ-like?
No. What does Christ mean in Greek? Messiah, anointed one, holy one, chosen one. There's different variations of it. Can you say that in a different language? Can you say Messiah in a different language and come up with a different word? Oh, yeah, you can. So why didn't they use the Hebrew term, anointed one? Why did they use the Greek term? You see what I mean? That's how we know it's what? What's that word I've been using? It starts with a P. Plagiarism. It's plagiarism. I don't know if you guys were going to get it for sake of time. I hope you have. We know it's plagiarism. Why aren't there any other examples of Reformed Egypt in ancient America? Not a single one. And yet we're supposed to believe that those plates came from Reformed Egyptian that became the Book of Mormon. The whole Book of Mormon was written in Reformed Egyptian. And not a single other historical thing on this continent at all has ever been written in Reformed Egyptian. And we can't even find the fact that it ever existed. We have Egyptian and we have non-Egyptian. We cannot find Reformed Egyptian. Why doesn't the linguistic relationship exist between the Native American language and the ancient Egyptians or Hebrew? There's no connections. There's no where this word becomes this word or this phrase becomes this phrase, and they moved on to make these languages. The Mexica spoke a different language. The Aztecs spoke a different language. The Zapotecs spoke a different language. And if I didn't say the Mayans, they spoke a different language. None of them spoke Hebrew. The Hebrews didn't speak Aztec. They didn't speak Mayan. They didn't speak Zapotec. And they didn't speak Aztecian. None of them spoke Egyptian except the Hebrews that were in Egypt who weren't alive at the time. Is everybody following the historical inaccuracies? I hope so. Talking till I'm blue in the face here, guys, and I'm okay with it. Why can't the Anthem transcript, which contains the copies of the supposed Reformed Egyptian characters, be identified with any forms of Egyptian? The only 3 Egyptologists that have looked at it say it does not contain Egyptian. And this is from Ferguson's collection. It is in the archives of none other than Brigham Young University. That means you, as a student of BYU, could go into the archives and read that very fact. Guys, let me say that again for you. 3 Egyptologists that have looked at it say it does not contain Egyptian. You think they would know it? And that's when the Mormon Church would say, hey, they don't have the seer stone, which we do have Joseph Smith's talisman, by the way. They don't have the seer stone to use to see. Well, if Joseph Smith was translating it by the stone and not the plates, I asked the question earlier, why did he need the plates? Okay? If the Book of Mormon, I'm not going to read that one again. It was about the hill of Cumorah. Again, you guys can really dig into that. I'm not going to dig into that one. If the Book of Mormon is true, why did the Indians fail to turn white when they became Mormon? 2 Nephi 36, prior to the 1981 revision, it was stated, and I quoted this the other day when I did all the racist verses, that when they became Mormons, their skin would become white and delightsome. Is that what the Washington Redskins were known for, is the white and delightsome? Or what did their symbol look like? What about the Cleveland Indians? What color is he, by the way? The Cleveland Indian for the baseball team? He's red. He's red. Okay, guys, the idea of this red skin tone was a real thing. Guess what color they were when John Smith got here?
White.
They were darker, but they weren't white. Okay? They were darker. They were a darker red. Okay? Or again, we say red. It could have been a brown. What do I know? I wasn't here. They thought they were red. They thought they were skin of red, just like Columbus. They were like, oh, we showed up and there's a bunch of white people. Does anybody remember what the Indians called us? Bob Hope has a movie. There you go. Did you get my movie reference? Let's go, man. Paleface and Son of Paleface. They called us Paleface. Okay? Later they would call us Ghost Faces because they believed the white sheet of a ghost, which, again, a couple rappers would do that later, but shout out to anybody that gets that one. Why aren't the Indian tribes racially or genetically the same as the Hebrews? They have a completely different genetic lineage and bloodline. The American Indians are all from the Mongoloid origin. They're not from the Hebrew world. So why are all the Indians and Mongoloid and all the Hebrews, except the Mormons who come and say, we're actually them, so they should be at some point in some way Hebrew, and they're not. Number three for me, why did Joseph Smith send missionaries to the Lamanites if the American Indians at the time weren't really Lamanites? This is Doctrine and Covenants 1041, 28, 8, 54, 8, and you can Google the rest of them. He considered the Indians to be Lamanites, but they weren't Lamanites yet because he had to send missionaries of the Nephites to the Lamanites to convert them. But yet he already calls them Lamanites. Anybody seeing that? That would be like me telling you, I'm going to send you to the lost world full of Christians so that you can make the lost Christians Christians. Well, that doesn't make any sense, does it? They're not Christian yet. You know, it doesn't fit in it doesn't fit with what we know, and it doesn't fit with what they're saying. So looking at the witnesses, why were the witnesses only allowed to see the place with spiritual eyes? We hit that one earlier. That was always bothered me. I want to see it. I want to hold it. I want to touch it. I'm not telling you guys I would have been Thomas, but I can tell you I probably would have been next to him. I am an eternal skeptic. If it's true, you better be able to prove it to me. If it's true, I better be able to find it and be able to put it together and make it make sense. I am an eternal skeptic. I'm telling you, if God could be disproven, I'd have found it. If God's like these other gods, I would have found it. And I've always said I would make what cry? What cry would I make if God was just like these gods they make him out to be? The cry of Prometheus. What did Prometheus yell out? What does he scream when the raven rips his liver from his body? I hate all the gods. I hate all of them. If this was true, I would hate all the gods. If God's like, hey, I'm not going to send Jesus, there's not going to be a law, there's nothing, you just got to trust me. What am I trusting? Okay, what am I trusting exactly? The words of a stranger. And what are we taught as children when it comes to strangers?
Don't talk to strangers.
We don't talk to strangers. If the plates were real, why would it take faith to see them? In the Doctrine and Covenants 17:2, Joseph Smith said, without the plates, the scribes were doing a literal translation with the stone. So he's using the stone to translate the tablet, or the plates, not the plates themselves. If he has the plates, why isn't he using them? Why would he need the stone? And if he has the stone, why does he need the plates? Why would God do all of this? And then he tells you and I and the witnesses. Remember the witnesses? Oliver Cowdery, David Whitmore, Sidney Rigdon, and then later the 8 witnesses, which is in the front of your Book of Mormon that you can read. Why would he tell them? You just have to take it on faith. Imagine if I had the plates in like the drawer behind me. And you're like, Frank, can we see them? And I'm like, no. Just trust me. Close your eyes and you'll see them. And you're like, well, can't you just open them? I'm like, no. God wants me to be the only person that's ever seen them. Which wouldn't make sense because Mormons saw them, Moroni saw them, a couple other people saw them, but you can't see them. Is that what God's going for? Is God going for mystic? Is God going for these hidden revelations still? But I'm asking you guys, what do you think? No, he's not, is he? He's given us the full out. Did Jesus, was Nebuchadnezzar looking at the fires and seeing 3 people not burned, or he see 4 people?
4 people.
What about the handwriting on the wall? Was it translated in the book of Daniel? Does anybody know? Mene, Tekel, Parson? Mm-hmm. Did Daniel translate it, didn't he? Everything was physically there. Everything was standing right in front of them. Everything was evidenced. In fact, they touched Lazarus after they took the robes off of him. They touched Jesus, Thomas did especially, after his resurrection. Okay? There's not one time where God says, hey, I need you to just trust me on this one. Did Isaiah see heaven? What do you guys think? Isaiah see heaven? Did John see heaven? Did Paul see heaven? Is there a description similar enough that you and I can say there's a continuity and consistency that we can trust these men and what they saw? And then we say, well, what if they're making it up for fame? Well, Paul died because of what he made up. Is that what you see it going that way? Did he make it up for fame? No. He changed his whole life because of it. This idea of spiritualized is a cop-out for a plagiarizer, a liar, a false prophet, and a rapist. And that's exactly what Joseph Smith was. Why does the church now extol the witnesses when Joseph Smith condemned them? Remember, they left the church. Oliver Cowdery left the church. David Whitmore left the church. Sidney Rigdon left the church. Okay? And the Joseph Smith, in here, he said, oh yeah, they're great. They're chosen by God. Even in here, they're chosen by God to be witnesses and to be prophets and blah, blah, blah. But then they leave the church and Joseph Smith says, I've never met more men damnable to hell. I've never met more men more despicable, more unfaithful, more corrupt, more evil. All of this stuff, he literally condemned them into a Mormon hell. And then the Mormon church is like, man, we love these guys. Such great witnesses, such great people. Joseph Smith and them were such great buddies. You know, it's like they're lying to us. You guys remember when everybody thought Van Halen wasn't going to break up because they didn't really believe that there was a beef between the singers, and then Van Halen broke up and everyone said, oh, I guess it was true. Okay, that's what we have here. We're like, what? Is there really a beef between these guys? Yeah, they left the church, and the Mormon church is like, no, they were best friends. It'd be like the Mormon church is trying to convince you that Van Halen never broke up and Sammy Hagar never took over. And you're like, wait a minute, why can't I drive 55 these days? Why did Brigham Young say... let me see. Why did most of the witnesses leave the church? That's kind of looped in. We're not going to get deep into that. They did leave the church, every single one of them. That's a big deal. Imagine 12 of the apostles and like 2 of them leave and we have 10. Hurts the biblical numerology. Paul joins later, 10 or 11. We'll bounce back and forth. But imagine if all of them leave. All 12 of them leave. And then you and I are a dog or somebody's preaching. I'm going to read out of the book of Matthew, even though he left. It wouldn't fit. But why did Brigham Young say that the 3 witnesses doubted and disbelieved in their experiences? Some of the witnesses of the Book of Mormon handled the plates and conversed with the angels of God, were afterwards left to doubt and disbelieve that they had ever seen an angel. This is the Journal of Discourse 7, 164 and 1859 by Brigham Young. He says they left. They saw revelations of an angel and then they left. Can you imagine how much faith? Or I guess lack of, I don't know which one. How much faith in the false doctrine or how much lack of faith in the real doctrine to have an encounter with an angel and to be like, you know what, I'm just going to leave the church and go to a church that didn't have an encounter with an angel. It would make, at least be consistent about it. You know, if you're going to lie to me, at least be consistent about it. Let me make sure I'm closing my clothes, guys. Why are there cliched phrases of Indians like the 9 moons and the phrase of the Great Spirit included in the Book of Mormon? These were cliches. Did the Indians believe in a great spirit? Yeah. Did they believe in multiple spirits? Yes, they did. Remember, guys, they're pantheists. They believe God is everything. God is in everything. That's why Pocahontas says, I know every rock and tree and creature has a name, has a soul, all this. They believe all of it is God. So they don't just believe in a great spirit. They believe in great spirits. And they use the term 9 moons. Only certain even Indians use the moon in the same astrological way. But Joseph Smith quotes it as if it was true for all of them, because he didn't know his full Native American history. Imagine that. Imagine not being a prophet, not knowing everything. How did the Jaredites come up with the same rare idea of writing on plates 2,000 years before Lehi, when such recording systems did not exist yet? How did they record? Does anybody remember the Old Testament? They would write on something? Scrolls, papyrus, yeah. They didn't chisel into plates or anything for a long time, and yet we have the Josephites, Hebrews, carving into these plates, not writing onto a scroll. Why, how and why did they do it? How did they make the plates without the metallurgical stuff? And why did they do it before it existed? And if they discovered it, where's the discovery? Where's the root trace back to the Jaredites discovering, carving into plates that other nations would use? Am I following this kind of stuff? It just doesn't fit. Why is the Passover mentioned 71 times in the Bible but 0 times in the Book of Mormon? You will notice that the Book of Mormon has no knowledge of the separation of covenants. And in fact, Joseph Smith, let me see if I have it quoted, just in case. I had one. Joseph Smith actually says, or calls the Old Testament Jews Christians. He calls them Christians. He says they were being baptized into the church. Remember, he's trying to build as if his church that he started is built off of the church that God started. But you and I know that he didn't build the church until after the two kingdoms, northern and southern kingdom. The church comes in the new covenant in the book of Acts. That's the first time we see the church. That's the first time we see the true spiritual kingdom. But Joseph Smith doesn't know his covenants. He doesn't know his old covenant. He doesn't know his new covenant. He can't connect Passover with communion. He can't do any of it because he doesn't know any of it. How did the Book of Mormon characters get the priesthood when they weren't from the tribe of Levi? I guess I could have left that on the other page. I mentioned Shakespeare. Here's one. Why did Joseph Smith's accounts confuse whether he was visited by Moroni or Nephi? He called by my name and said unto me that he was a messenger sent from the presence of God to me, and that his name was Nephi. This is Joseph Smith in the Times and Seasons, Volume 3, page 753, 1842. But in Joseph Smith, 1851, The Pearl of Great Price, which is in here, page 41, he says that he was met by God and Jesus. Then he says he was met by Moroni. Well, which one is it? Who did he meet, guys? Let's take God and Jesus out of it. Moroni or Nephi? Who did he meet? And how did he get it wrong? And if Nephi says he's Nephi when he's actually Moroni, Moroni says he's Nephi when he's actually Moroni, we got people making mistakes. And we can say, well, they're only human, right? They only make mistakes, but Moroni's not human. He's a what?
Angel.
He's an angel. Look at you, kid. You ain't even been here for all this stuff. Okay? Let me see. So, why are the prophecies in the Book of Mormon dealing with events that have already occurred unrealistically specific? Okay, remember, guys, at the time Joseph Smith is translating this, these events already happened. Okay, John the Baptist has already baptized Jesus. Peter's already crucified upside down. The Horse Church has already started. This is the 1840s when Joseph Smith is translating this. Okay, and they are unrealistically specific. It mentions the three witnesses. Specifically, the three witnesses, and it'll call them by name. It mentions the Charles Anthon story. Google that one yourself. Columbus is described in the book. Okay, how many times did God give us just a little bit of extra history in case we needed it? What is the point of knowing that Columbus was there? Joseph Smith is trying too much. I love this part in The Miracle in 34th Street. When he says, well, he's not going to be able to, or how are we going to prove that I'm Santa Claus? He says, he's got to prove you're not. And he says, what we got to do is give him enough rope to do what?
Hang himself.
Hang himself. He says, this is what the guy says, he's going to go too far. He's going to go too far, and by doing it, he's going to put himself in a position where he loses his argument. That's what Joseph Smith does. He goes too far. He tries to show you so much that he's a prophet that God uses these anachronistic terms, these anachronistic anachronism, by the way, is used out of their time frame, in case you didn't know it. Using these figures and events so much that Columbus is mentioned. How many of you guys knew Columbus was in here? Joseph Smith's name is given. Okay? Did they ever say Jesus' name in the Old Testament? Did Moses say, after me a prophet named Jesus Christ is going to come? Did it say that? Or did it just say a prophet like unto me? What do you guys think? What did it say? Does it ever say Jesus' name in the Old Testament?
No.
No. Not in the term Jesus. Not at all. Okay? Because it wasn't there. But yet Joseph Smith's name is mentioned by God. Joseph Smith. God said, Joseph Smith. And they're like, God, that's a pretty white-sounding name. He's like, oh yeah, he's definitely a white soul. Okay? His name is specific. Smith called to be the translator of the Mormon record. That's the term that's used. Joseph Smith. It mentions the destruction of Jerusalem very specifically. Now, Matthew 24, Luke 23, and Mark 13 are going to give you prophetic views of that. He gets specific. He overdoes it. He hangs himself. It's 600 years. It mentions 600 years until Jesus is born. It tells you it's going to be 600 years and then Jesus is going to be born. Do we see that in the Old Testament? How do we know when Jesus was going to be born? Somebody yell a couple of them out as we're heading out. I'm coming to a close. How did we know when Jesus was being born? When the Messiah was here? You guys are at my house church. You should know some of these. Something's not going to depart from Judah until Shiloh comes. The scepter, meaning the king, the ruler. There's not going to be a person who sits on the throne of David who's not of the tribe of Judah. And when somebody does, that's when the Messiah is coming. He's going to be born of a seed of a woman. He's going to be born of a virgin. Okay? We know it's going to be in the reign of the fourth empire, according to Daniel. Because we know it's not on the other three. We know that there's going to be still a temple that's going to be there. Because at some point, it's going to be in the temple in order to fulfill these prophecies. Okay? It is not as specific as where Micah says, 250 years and Jesus will be there. 490 years and Jesus will be there. You can count it to the day. He never gives that specific, but in the Book of Mormon, you can trace it from 600 years. He hung himself. Why does he know it so specifically? Is God that good of a prophecy given to him? No, it's because Joseph Smith already knew the answer. Okay? Martin Harris in the Lost Manuscripts, 1 Nephi 9, in the words of Mormon, Martin Harris in the Lost Manuscript is mentioned. How did that happen? You know, remember, God's Word can't be changed, by the way, and yet there's a lost manuscript. Come on, guys, make it make sense. If His Word can't be corrupted, we can't have a lost manuscript. And if we have a lost manuscript, His Word can be messed up, corrupted. It can be changed. It can be altered. And they're like, no, it can't, because we found it. Which means there was a time when they hadn't yet found it. Is everybody following me on that? Why do the unfulfilled prophecies of the Book of Mormon remain still unfulfilled? One of the prophecies in the Book of Mormon is that all the Jews are going to become Christian, and then they're going to inherit the Holy Land. Are they over there now? Yeah. Are they all Christian? No. And in fact, some of the most anti-Christian people on the planet Earth, it makes me sick that people sin so hard for Israel and the Jews when they're as anti-Christian as they are. They're about as anti-Christian as the Mormons, which is why they make strange bedfellows, but yet still bedfellows nonetheless. Why is the Book of Mormon specific about Christ, but does not add anything the New Testament does not already address? They don't give you anything from Jesus' age from like 12 to 30. They don't tell you anything you didn't already know. The only thing they do is quote it and quote it and quote it. Why does the Book of Mormon prophesy that Jews would be restored in the land of their inheritance if they believed in Christ? Again, second thing was mentioned the same way. They're already over there and they did not, in fact, accept Christ, not in any way. They're still waiting for their Jewish homeland to be restored. They're waiting for the temple to come back. The Gentiles will be made second-rate citizens, even though we have to help build it. Why did Amma not know when Christ was coming? Remember, Jesus visited them in America, for those who don't know. And after Nephi, after he resurrected over there in Jerusalem, he visited them over here in America as well. But Nephi did not know when Christ was coming, according to Alma 13:21 and 26, even though he possessed the plates of Nephi and Lehi that were written. So if Lehi and Nephi did the magic joke again by accident, if they knew when Christ was coming, why didn't Alma know, who had the same stuff? Okay, it doesn't make sense. Joseph Smith uses terms about war and patriotism such as liberty, freedom, country, religion, flags, etc. Because what was brewing at the time? Or actually, I guess to say, what just finished brewing, and then we even had a part 2 before Joseph Smith's birth.
The Old and New Testament?
American Revolution. Okay, and does anybody remember the American Revolution Part 2, what war that is? The second time Britain came. We actually had a rematch of the American Revolution. Britain came back again and they burned the White House down. The War of 1812. The War of 1812. Okay? But he uses these terms because the country was already so politically charged because of the 1776 revolution in the War of 1812. So at the time of 1840, when Joseph Smith is translating plates that have been written for thousands of years, it contains libertarian language. It contains revolutionary language because it wasn't written 2,000 or 3,000 years before that. Why is it such an agrarian society is the only society mentioned in the Book of Mormon? Because it's the only one Joseph Smith was familiar with. He can't go outside of what he knows because he's not a prophet. Why is a democracy after a monarchy described in book Messiah, chapter 23 and 29? It happened in the history of the U.S. We went from a monarchy to a democracy. You see that anywhere else in history at the time? Even the Greeks were trying to get a democracy, but they had a ruler, they had a leader, they had Caesar even still. Remember, the Senate killed Julius Caesar. They were trying to establish democracy, and they never got there. The first time we see a monarchy become a democracy was in the 1776 revolution of the American Revolution here against Great Britain. Okay, yet Joseph Smith in the Book of Mormon mentions that there's a monarchy that deposes into a democratic government. He is a plagiarist. Why did Mormon, Nephi, and the other heroes of the Book of Mormon have so many common traits with Joseph Smith? It says they were large in stature. They had visions while being teenagers. And this is from The Refiner's Fire by John Brooke. If you want to go the rest of Singularities, I'm not going to do that. Why does the Book of Mormon repeatedly address 19th century readers? Why is it specific to that audience? If it was written 2,000, 3,000 years ago, it would be written to what audience?
The
Hebrews. It was written to the Hebrew audience. Who did Moses write to?
Hebrews.
The Hebrews. Okay, who is the Book of Hebrews written to?
The Hebrews.
There you go. I figured you guys would get that one. Why is Paul referred to before his time Paul said, death, where is thy sting? Paul is the one that mentions that, and Joseph Smith quotes it in the Book of Mormon before Paul existed. Remember, Nephi left left 600 BC, around 600 BC to get to America. Why is it that 350 names in the Book of Mormon, 100 are found in the Bible, other places and names are found in 19th century maps, and the rest are derivative of biblical names? Because he's a what?
Liar.
Not a liar. I'm looking for something specific. You get in trouble for this in school.
Plagiarist.
He's a plagiarist. He's a plagiarist. He's using all of these other names. I'm not going to get into that, guys. I'm coming to close. I keep saying I know I am. Why is the Greek word Christ used? We already did that one. Let me see if we got any more good ones here. He confuses the covenants. We did that one. Guilt-ridden sex. We're not going to get into that one. We already did the sex code. We're not going to get into it. Sorry, guys. You can Google some of these. I just want to give you the ones that really matter. All right, here. We'll finish with the ones about God. I think that'll be good. Why isn't Elohim, or God, being the father of Jehovah, which is Jesus, being a mortal man, discussed one time in the Bible? Not one time is it mentioned. Not even referenced. Not even a little bit. It's not even alluded to. Nobody asked God, and He's like, I'll tell you about it later when we get to America. It's never once mentioned. And that is a key theology. Because what is the book of the Bible built on? What type of theology? Monotheist. It's going to get you guys. They're monotheists. Why is polygamy condemned in the Book of Mormon and then condoned in the Doctrine and Covenants? That's something you can ask Joseph Smith, but ask him that, guys. Why is it condemned in the Book of Mormon? Remember, it's a sin in the Book of Mormon, polygamy. And then Doctrine and Covenants, Joseph Smith says, it's what God wanted all along, and it's how you and I get to heaven. Let me see if that's the last one I want. All right, guys. So as we're drawing to a close here, guys, remember, we're looking at people. We're loving people. And this is where we'll come here, guys. Weapons of discipleship, you got to love them. I know it's crazy. I know some of this stuff is so far-fetched. You're like, are you kidding me? And some of these people are so well-versed in some things, and they're so intelligent in other areas. Again, guys, our CIA is built of the Mormons. You can Google that yourself. We saw Mitt Romney. We've seen people. They're witches. They're Mormon witches. And they're not idiots. Okay, again, they might be closet idiots, but they're not. So what it is indoctrination, guys. They've been made to believe it. And their whole life is based on the fact that they have to believe it's true, or they leave everything, or lose everything. This one, guys, you got to teach them Jesus. If you ever talk to a Mormon, and they say, I've never really read the whole New Testament, take them through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Let them meet Jesus. Let them see Jesus. Let them talk to Jesus the way you did. Let them love on Jesus and be loved on by Jesus the way you and I do through the gospel. And I can tell you that's going to do a lot more damage to their Mormon doctrine than anything you and I can say or do. What Jesus is going to teach them and show them and say is going to make sense. Compare him also to Joseph Smith. Why would that be God's prophet and not Jesus? Jesus was the pinnacle. Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, everybody, every other prophet is worse than Joseph Smith, or worse than Jesus. I'm sorry. Why wouldn't he stop here? You got to know their books. You don't have to know it all the way. You guys can see. I know bits and pieces. I don't even know the full totality all the time. Usually once I sit down with the Mormon, it kind of comes to me, and I can kind of get it all back. But know their denominational language, know what they believe, know what they say, know the terms they use. It's not the same God, it's not the same Jesus, it's not the same baptism, it's not the same temple, it's not the same church. And then like I said, guys, make sure you've studied yourself approved. So, my pink sticky note is somewhere in here. Here it is. So, what book do they use? Remember, I don't have a marker. But remember my whole chart of the church. What book do they use? Do they use the Bible?
No.
Yeah, they do. Old and New Testament. What else do they use? Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. Okay? Remember what we're comparing. Does the church need more than the Bible? No. Okay? What do they call themselves? Mormon. Mormons. Church of the Latter-day Saints. Is their purpose the same as Christ for atonement and redemption? No. They want you to become gods to be sealed for time and all eternity. Okay? Their view on prayer is the fact that you're praying to God, who's one of many gods. It just happens to be the God of your planet. Communion. They take with what?
Water and...
Yep. And bread. At one time specifically, Wonder Bread. And for those of us that know some of the references in like the 60s and stuff growing up, Wonder Bread was often used as a term for like the white person. Like, oh, dude, you're as white as Wonder Bread. You know? So it's ironic to me that a group based on like super racism would use Wonder Bread specifically, but they use water. What does water keep them away from?
The blood.
The blood. It keeps them away from the blood. Okay? Their offices and officers, guys, they have way more offices than the Bible teaches. They got priests, they got bishops, they got temple priests, they got Mormon priests, they got the priests of Melchizedek and on and so on. which means that their officers and offices are not found in Scripture at all. And then again, baptism, guys. They baptize for the dead, which means even if you die, you have a chance to be saved. They do not baptize for the forgiveness of sin and the gift of the Holy Spirit in the same way. What you're baptized for is part of that redemption of the blood, part of the redemption of Adam, and most of it is you're being baptized into Lucifer's priesthood and power. Guys, when we know this kind of stuff, that's what makes our life easier to disciple and more aware. So again, guys, I encourage you to read it. I encourage you to know it, but know your spiritual gift. Guys, we come back. We're now finished the Mormon expose. That's what I wanted to go through so long tonight. Thank you guys for hanging in there with me. For those of you guys that did, we're done that. We're going to come back. We're going to start hitting some more groups. The first one up is going to be the Church of the Seventh-day Adventists, our Sabbatarian friends, our church on Saturday friends. We're going to look at what they believe, what it says compared to the Bible, and then we're going to look at if they even follow what the Bible teaches in relation to the Sabbath. Because they don't necessarily have a God element, they have an element. We're like, yeah, but that changed a little bit. And you're like, where did it change? And they're like, oh, it didn't change in there, it changed out here. So guys, if you have any questions, don't hesitate. Talk to me. Have any people that need to talk about Mormonism, don't hesitate. Talk to me. You know anybody that's in these denominations, from Islam to any of them, do not hesitate to talk to me so that we can go out and tear these strongholds down. But are you just passing off information, or are you battling demons? What do you guys think? You just passing on information, or are we battling demons?
Battling demons.
We're battling demons, guys. Remember, one name, Mormo, is in their name. So you got to make sure you're praying up. All right, that's all from me.